Back in the day, no one was talking about this in the workplace. It was taboo talking about mental health. Why is that? And what has changed today? And how can companies sort of, continue to push people into spaces where they feel safe talking about this and not, going too far? I have so many questions actually wrapped up in this question. Wait a minute. This is about 4 questions. So I'll take one at a time.
Companies are made up of people, right? And so if we can get one person, and typically a leader, a person in a position of leadership, to really kind of model the way forward about having those honest conversations, and that really starts to disrupt stigma. It doesn't always have to be this place of vulnerability that folks go to in terms of sharing their own struggles. It can also have typical conversation around the fact that I am attending to my own well-being.
Let's be honest. When it comes to a thriving career, we're all still figuring it out. Welcome to the Still at Work podcast. On this show, we take questions about navigating the workplace and work them out together. I'm Kim Taylor, head of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Coursera, and I'm your host. Let's get to work. Any questions before we jump into it?
What brings you joy?
Oh, now look at me. Now I got to switch gears. What brings me joy? That's a great question. My family, my children, spending time with my husband and my family. Food brings me a lot of joy. What about you? Before we even get into the show, what brings you joy?
What brings me joy? Getting to be alive, really be alive, being my full self wherever I'm at, no matter what group I'm in front of. That is the thing that brings me the most joy. It's living out loud.
I love that.
That's the thing that I think is hard to do, but I really thrive with having that opportunity.
All right, learners, let's get into it. That's Tramaine El-Amin from the National Council for Mental Wellbeing. She's vice president for a program called Mental Health First Aid.
For me, what has fueled my work in the mental health space has everything to do with what I saw as the gaps in resources for my own community, for my own family, as it related to really dealing with anything surrounding mental health and well-being. And specifically where I saw those gaps was in the workplace itself. How do we fix systems and make sure that systems that are made up out of people actually have the resources necessary to support whole people, not just parts of ourselves, leaving them outside of the door at work, but really being able to address mental health holistically, and that includes the workplace.
Our question today comes directly from me. Yes, I get to submit questions too, and I've had this one for a while. As I've worked on bringing this podcast to you, I've wanted the opportunity to ask someone like Tremaine how to talk about a topic that a lot of people might be nervous to bring up at work. So today's question: how should we be talking about mental health? From entry-level employee to executive, what training do we need and what conversations should we be having?
I think that there's not one specific answer to this kind of question. There's not a wrong time or a right time to talk about our health and our well-being. I think it's most important to be comfortable in actually having the conversation. And when we think about talking about mental health at work, if we think about a few years back, it was very, very taboo to have this conversation. I think that also one of the things that was difficult was the fact that people, didn't know what to do with the information once they start the conversation. We always, as humans, we want to connect with others. That's in the nature of being a human being. But not having a place to put a conversation or knowing what to do or where to go next is often the thing that keeps us from actually connecting holistically and from an authentic place. And so when we think about where to start, we start there. We start with getting comfortable in having the uncomfortable conversations. And oftentimes we don't know how to do that. We don't know exactly where we should start. What's prying? What is going too far? Where are the boundaries when it comes to having this kind of conversation? And so what we do, and I get to do, is go around to the country with about 24,000 other folks who are our instructors of our program, to implement a program called Mental Health First Aid, which teaches you how to know where to start with that conversation, where to take it, where not to go, so that we keep the environment safe for yourself and for others. And I think that's where it starts, is really understanding, what do I know? What's the gap between what I know and what I feel like I need to know to feel comfortable in actually beginning that conversation at work?
How does a company, how does a workplace team sort of create space for people to get more comfortable with talking about mental health? Because like you said, back in the day, no one was talking about this in the workplace. It was taboo to probably talk about this.
So if we can get one person, and typically a leader, a person in a position of leadership, to really kind of model the way forward about having those honest conversations, and that really starts to disrupt stigma, right? Because stigmas exist. We all have them. We all experience some really held beliefs about what it means to connect with others and share more of ourselves and our own experiences. And so if a leader can lead the way, that's amazing, right? It kind of makes it okay for everyone else too. And that can be in the positive sense of, what are we doing, or what is that leader doing to address their own wellness and well-being as it relates to mental health. It doesn't always have to be this place of vulnerability that folks go to in terms of sharing their own struggles. It can also have typical conversation around, what are my self-care strategies? The fact that I am attending to my own well-being, and being comfortable sharing things like sleep or journaling, or things and activities that I'm doing, in order for well-being to be part of the daily conversation.
I like that. Just being transparent about what are your self-care strategies. That's something that's very actionable. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not only actionable, it's comfortable. I don't know if you think about it, if we think about these other kind of healthcare challenges internally. Oh, well, I'm going and I'm walking 10,000 steps a day, or, I didn't get to 10,000 yesterday, but today, I did hit that 10,000 mark, and I want to celebrate that. I want to bring that into this space.
Now, mental health first aid, I think I've read, has trained over 1.6 million people across the country, which is incredible. For those who may not know, can you tell us a little bit more about what mental health first aid is and why it's such a valuable tool for workplaces?
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely we train 1.6, but now we are over 3.8 million people trained.
Wow.
In the US alone. And it's a global program, so more than almost 7 million people globally have been trained in the program. And in the US, the National Council for Mental Wellbeing brought the program here in 2008. And since that time, we've trained those folks through a Train the Trainer program and through direct delivery of training to really get at that segment that we talked about, where, how do I feel comfortable? How do we support individuals in feeling comfortable having these conversations? And so that means it's about early intervention and prevention. And it makes sure that folks know how to identify, understand, and then respond to signs or symptoms of a mental health or substance use challenge that someone might be experiencing. And one of the things that we've done lately, and when I say lately, it still is almost, I think, about 8 years ago, that we launched Mental Health First Aid at work. And we really focused and saw the gap between what we were really being effective in doing in the community, making sure that communities are having this conversation, families are having this conversation. But we spend so much time at work, so we launched a new program to help employers really reduce the negative impact of fatigue and stress on employees, and really giving staff, including managers and leaders, the skills that they need.
As we are in an age of global workplaces, where we are working across cultures, across regions, are there any tips or guidance or any interesting discussions to be had around what mental health looks like and how it might change from one culture to another or one region to another? And is it okay to talk about mental health in the same way in one region versus another. As the head of DEI for a global organization, I'm always mindful of, is the work that I'm doing here in the U.S. going to translate to our team in India or in Singapore or in the Middle East, in Latin America? So how does the conversation change, or does it change when we're thinking about, cross-cultural mental health?
And I think it's important for us to think about, yes, the US base, but also what is the multinational experience of this global conversation around mental well being? And what I have seen and what we've experienced is that health is health, and that mental health is a part of health. And so as we approach that conversation, where appropriate, having the conversation to talk about, okay, how are we feeling? How are we doing? How can we do better is universal. That conversation is universal. Now, the words that we use and the framing that we use may be different based on the needs of the particular group or individual group that we're in front of. But what I love about the mental health first aid approach is that it really is a framework, and then it could be adapted to whatever the local needs are. Mental health first aid's available in more than 30 countries globally.
A lot of times employees may feel something's off, right? Maybe with a coworker or even with themselves, but they don't know how to address it. How can we spot the signs when a coworker might be struggling with their mental health? And what do we do in those moments?
So I mentioned to you a framework, and in our mental health first aid program, there's a 5-step action plan that really helps us figure out, okay, what am I seeing? How do I support this person? And what do I do next? Right. And so we teach that 5-step action plan that can be used whether the person might be experiencing something like a crisis, whether they need immediate support, like for instance, a panic attack or something else that's happening in the workplace, or a non-crisis situation where someone's just talking about, okay, here's what's going on for me. Here's the struggles or the challenges that I'm experiencing, and I need to know how to go to a next step, right? And so we teach that action plan. It's called ALGIE. It is a mnemonic for assessing for risk of suicide or self-harm or other kinds of challenges, listening non-judgmentally, giving reassurance and information, encouraging professional help, or encouraging self-help and other support strategies. So that's the mnemonic we teach. And so what we also teach is it's not up to us to diagnose what is happening. We are not creating folks who now have some 4-year degree and have gone on and can charge billable hours. We're not doing that. We're just making sure people have enough knowledge to connect people to the resources that exist.
I think that's so important, like not waiting until something's wrong to be having these conversations. If we're always talking about our resources, benefits, things that are available for employees to tap into to ensure that they're in a mentally healthy place, then it won't seem so awkward or it won't seem like prying when you're noticing that an employee or a colleague is going through something and bringing something up. So I think that's really important. I wanted to call that out. Another thing that I was thinking on as you were speaking, does the remote working world change this a bit? And maybe the research is not complete yet because we've kind of made this shift over just the last few years. But I know I work 100% remote, and it can be easy to turn your camera off, to sort of mask, things that are going on, whereas if you're in the office and you're in person and people are a little bit more in tune to like your body language and your moods. And is there anything that we need to be aware of when working in the remote world when it comes to mental health? Should we be checking in a little bit more with our colleagues to ensure that people are okay? Or is that overstepping? I'm just very interested in how remote work ties into, recognizing mental health challenges in the workplace.
Really, the long story short is it depends, right? And so have we fostered other kinds of space and opportunity for people to feel comfortable at work? What structures and policies and procedures exist are also underlying this conversation. So I don't want to minimize, training and education is great, but it's being put into an environment that needs to be conducive for this dialogue to even happen in the first place, right? So let's be clear that other work still has to be done around this for it to be effective. The second thing that I'll say is it's really important for leaders to create structures around this conversation. So really it's about noticing the changes, either positive or negative. If there's an abrupt change or a sudden change for a person's behavior, whether it's remote or in person, I think that it's important that we notice those changes. I've been working remotely since 2015, so well before the global pandemic. I think we didn't have the tools necessary from a technology perspective at that time in place in all of our organizations to really foster being able to check in on a regular basis. And I think we've gotten into a rhythm and a pattern, but even that can wind up being a little bit stale, if you will, if we get into this rote thing where we say, well, how's everybody doing? What's the reply typically? Oh, I'm good. I'm fine. Happy Monday. All is well, right? And it really is about dusting that concept off, being really intentional in really engaging with people, whether that's remotely or in person. It's about that authenticity of I really do care to make sure that you have what you need to deliver optimally, but also that you are okay as an individual. And I think whether that's in a little square on a screen, whether that's, touch and base live and in 3D, it's all about us making sure that we're intentional, that we really do care about the answer we get on the other side of are you okay?
When we think about all of the generations now that are working in the workforce, where do we see highlights? Where do we see lowlights? My grandmother, who is amazing, is 90. She'll be 95 in February. She's 94. And I remember when she retired from her job, she worked for the state, and had worked there for, long time, retired. Then I have my parents and my in-laws who are in their 60s and 70s, also very similar. Then you have my husband and I'm not going to tell you how old I am. You can guess. And then I have, a son who'll be 17 and a daughter who is 9. And there are even differences between their generations. And I can see how we each think of mental health differently in our own, generations, how it affects the way that we work. Like my daughter, I just can't wait to see what the working world looks like for her in her generation and how they handle it and how they handle working with authority and all of that, because she, as far as she knows already, she runs the world. But mental health is actually really important to her as well. She's only 9, but she lives in a world where her sanity and her peace is first and foremost, which is very different from the older generations. The older generations, you work, you almost listen to what any person in the, position of authority tells you to do, and you do it and keep your head down. And you just stick it out until you can retire. And there's a lot of, differences between that generation and where my daughter is. So just wondering, what the research says, about the different age groups, the different generations in the workplace, and how mental health plays out differently within these different groups.
Yeah. So there's so much. I mean, we could just have that as the topic.
Yeah.
We would go for an hour just talking about the differences in approaches. I want to focus on the hope. And what I see as the hope, and what we see as that is hopeful in a lot of places, there's been a shift in mindset and the requisite changes that are necessary to align to those. For instance, if we think about Gen Z, right, who's also in the workplace with the millennial cohort. Gen X started the transition, but when we think about those three, they make up the majority of the workforce at this point, those 3 generations. And the mindset around what it means to work, what it means to have balance. I love that there's this concept that's floating around that there is no balance. It's about harmony, workplace, not in the work-life balance, but work-life harmony. And so I love that concept because I think it's being embraced more and more. I think that there's such a positive momentum when it comes to that. Yes, there's differences. Yes, there's different approaches to the work. But I think all of us recognize the need to understand that there's nothing we can do to move forward that separates our mental health from our physical health. They are essentially joined together. And for that reason, we have to pay attention to them and talk about them at work.
Yeah. For you personally, what are your top self-care practices?
Oh, okay. I always say this one, but no. No is my favorite thing.
Like just saying no.
Saying no, boundaries. I always use that one because it's so important because I forget. I usually say it just to remind myself. You said that, and then you said it on a podcast. You need to go do it. And so I think that's a good one, right? I always think that's a good one because sometimes we think self-care is this external thing, and I think that it's important to reframe that. Yes, no, boundaries.
And I want to just pause there for a minute because I think it's so true, but just talk a little bit more, like double click. My team laughs at me for saying double click all the time. Like someone else said, that's not me. Someone else said it and I grabbed it, but let's double click on that. The saying no, what is it that's actually happening inside of you when you allow yourself to say no and like draw those boundaries? Why is that considered self-care?
See, now you want me to tell everybody my business. Okay. So here's the thing. I'm going to give you an example of when I'm in sync with the no and when I'm trying to fight against it. Because I think that that's the thing. We think that, oh, she's just got this, or people just have this thing within them and they get to do it and I can dismiss it. No, it's a fight. It's a fight. So typically it's, things that I can do, but I shouldn't. Right? And it's typically when it comes to workplaces, it's usually someone else's responsibility that I want to take on because I want it done a certain way. Right? And I have to challenge that. If you delegate or if you're a leader, you will always have that tension, right? Of delegation for perfection and don't not let perfect be the enemy of good. Let it be good. And so I think that's one side of what I'm, struggling with it. And then on the other side, it's the no's of, I deserve to have time for myself. It's saying no to the thing that I want to do in order to do the thing that needs to be done, which is sometimes it's nothing.
Yeah.
And I struggle with nothing.
Tremaine, this has been such an insightful conversation. I feel like we could go on and on. But before we close, what's your number one message for employees, for leaders, for learners, for listeners, anyone listening? If there's just one thing you want them to walk away with, what's the message when it comes to mental health in the workplace?
Yeah, I think that believing that you can make an impact is where we have to start when it comes to mental health and well-being. Thinking that it's someone else's role, responsibility, or job to do is where we come into a pitfall. And I think each one of us creating space for authentic conversations, for really reimagining what it means to think about well-being and mental well-being as part of the overall conversation around health is important. And you can gain skills that you might not have right now in being able to feel comfortable doing this. Awareness is great, but awareness is not enough. Right? Mental health first aid is not an awareness raising program. It is really that skill building to make sure that we have the ability to have these conversations that are challenging. And it's only one part of the broader narrative and the broader work that needs to be done. We also need to take a look at our policies and procedures, take a look at how we're having conversation or inviting dialogue, and starting with ourselves. Because if we're not right, we're not going to be able to support others and we're not going to be able to do any of the other things. So I think that starting with us and starting with what is possible and the fact that it can be possible to really make mental health a part of overall health is where I hope that we can start from.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much, Tremaine, for your expertise and the work you're doing to really change how we talk about mental health. All right, that's it for today. So that means it's recap time. Top things I'm taking away from my conversation are Tramaine's mnemonic for how to be there for our coworkers, or ALGIE. A, assess risk. L, listen. G, give reassurance. And I, information. E, encourage self-help and support. I also got a reminder to embrace mental health programs and new attitudes about mental health. We can really learn something from Gen Z and our younger coworkers. Finally, I'm going to be more transparent about self-care and mental health. I think I told you all before, but my therapy appointments are proudly and publicly displayed on my calendar. We can all model that it's okay to be still at work on ourselves. Thank you all so much for joining me on this episode of Still at Work, and thank you so much to Tremaine for these takeaways in our entire conversation. Do you have questions about how to navigate your workplace and everything that goes along with that? We can help. Go to the form in our show description to submit your question. While you're there, please don't forget to subscribe to our podcast, Still at Work, wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also rate and leave our show a review to help others find us. That's it for today's episode. We'll see you soon. Views and opinions expressed during the podcast are those of the individuals expressing them and do not necessarily reflect those of Coursera or Human Group Media.